Have you ever wondered what truly lurked behind the quiet walls of medieval convents? What if the serene lives of nuns were suddenly shattered by inexplicable events, chilling phenomena that defied all reason and understanding, spanning centuries from the 11th to the 15th? Prepare to delve into the shrouded reports of bewildering occurrences that even today leave us with more questions than answers. 7. Unexplained knowledge. Imagine a quiet nun, living a life of devout prayer and humble service within the ancient stone walls of her convent, suddenly speaking in a language she has never heard, or revealing secrets known only to distant individuals. These aren't tales of divine revelation in the traditional sense, but perplexing instances where knowledge, alien and profound, seemed to inexplicably manifest within the minds and voices of these medieval women. Chroniclers of the age, often attempting to categorize such occurrences, found themselves wrestling with events that simply did not fit neatly into established theological frameworks, leaving behind records that speak of pure bewilderment. One prominent report, often cited in later monastic commentaries, concerns Sister Elara of the convent of St. Cecilia in Saxony around the year 1285. Sister Elara was known for her quiet disposition and limited schooling, her life revolving around the daily rhythms of prayer and manual labor. Yet, according to accounts meticulously detailed by the convent's scribe, Father Theodoric, a startling transformation took place during a communal evening prayer. Sister Elara, who had only ever spoken the local Saxon dialect and rudimentary Latin for her prayers, suddenly began to utter long, flowing sentences in what several visiting merchants from the distant Byzantine Empire recognized as High Greek. Her pronunciation was flawless, her vocabulary extensive, encompassing philosophical concepts and theological arguments far beyond the grasp of any uneducated peasant, let alone a nun whose world was confined to her cloister. The words poured from her not in a frenzied or distressed manner, but with an almost academic precision, as if she were a scholar delivering a lecture. Those present were stunned, some falling to their knees in fear, others in silent awe. The Greek continued for nearly an hour, covering topics ranging from ancient cosmogony to the intricate theological debates of the Eastern Church themes Sister Elara had no conceivable way of having encountered. Just as abruptly as it began, it ceased, and Sister Elara returned to her usual quiet self, appearing disoriented and unable to recall anything she had said. Subsequent attempts to prompt her to speak Greek again were met with blank stares. The incident was documented as a profound and utterly unexplainable event, leaving the community grappling with the source of this temporary, unlearned fluency. Another astonishing instance of unexplained knowledge emerged from the convent of Our Lady of Sorrows in Umbria, Italy, in the early 1340s. Sister Beatrice, an elderly nun, had been suffering from a prolonged illness that left her bedridden and often unresponsive. Her fellow sisters attended to her with diligence, believing her days were numbered. Yet, one cold winter morning, Sister Beatrice startled her caregivers by suddenly sitting upright and, with remarkable clarity, began to describe in vivid detail events occurring hundreds of miles away in the city of Venice. She spoke of specific political machinations within the Doge's council, detailed a particular fire that had broken out in the Rialto market, and even named individuals involved in a private dispute, all information that was not yet publicly known. The nuns, initially dismissing it as a feverish delusion, grew increasingly disturbed as couriers arriving weeks later from Venice confirmed every single detail Sister Beatrice had described. The fire, the council's secret debates, the private dispute, all had transpired exactly as she had stated, down to precise dates and names. Sister Beatrice herself offered no explanation for this sudden access to distant, hidden information. When asked how she knew these things, she would simply look confused, sometimes even distressed, as if the knowledge had passed through her, rather than originating within her. The local bishop, upon hearing the detailed accounts, ordered an investigation, but no rational explanation for Sister Beatrice's pre-cognitive remote viewing abilities could be found. The records merely acknowledged the veracity of her statements and the complete mystery surrounding their source. Consider also the case of Sister Juliana, a young novice at the Cistercian Abbey of St. Ursula in Normandy, France, during the latter part of the 14th century. Sister Juliana was known for her gentle nature but limited intellectual curiosity, struggling even with the basic tenets of Latin scripture. Yet, one afternoon, during a period of intense contemplative prayer, she reportedly entered a trance-like state and began to recite verbatim lengthy passages from obscure philosophical texts that even the most learned scholars of the region had rarely encountered. What was particularly striking was that these passages included commentaries and interpretations that had only recently been penned by scholars in distant universities, texts that had not yet been widely disseminated, some of which were even considered heretical by Orthodox Church authorities. Sister Juliana articulated complex arguments with a fluency and insight that astounded her confessor, Father Anselm, who was a respected theologian himself. He wrote extensively of his struggle to reconcile her background with the depth of her pronouncements. She spoke of logical syllogisms, ancient atomist theories, and Gnostic cosmology with an understanding that transcended mere recitation. When she emerged from these states, often after several hours, she would be completely unaware of what she had uttered. She would recall nothing of the intricate philosophical discourse she had just delivered, and when pressed would express confusion and sometimes fear at the suggestions of what had transpired. Father Anselm, in his personal journal, confessed that he felt as if another mind spoke through her, a mind that possessed knowledge utterly alien to her own. These occurrences, sporadic but apal, continued for several months before gradually ceasing, leaving behind a profound question mark in the Abbey's history. Consistent thread through these reports is the inexplicable acquisition of knowledge that was not and could not have been naturally obtained by the individuals involved, whether it was the sudden perfect command of an unknown language, the detailed perception of distant, unconfirmed events, or the spontaneous recitation of arcane philosophical texts. These phenomena challenged the very understanding of how the human mind operates. Chroniclers, unable to attribute these occurrences to any known cause, merely recorded them as they were witnessed, astonishing manifestations of knowledge appearing from nowhere through individuals who possessed no prior connection to such information. The absence of a conventional explanation and the consistent accounts across disparate convents and centuries stand as testament to a puzzling aspect of medieval monastic life that remains utterly baffling to this day. These are not merely stories of inspiration, but accounts of information surfacing through individuals who, by all normal measures, should have been incapable of accessing it, leaving observers with a profound sense of wonder and unsettling mystery. 6. Levitation. Quiet, ordered life of a medieval nun was theoretically devoid of sensationalism, bound by solemn vows and daily routines. Yet, some of the most startling and widely reported phenomena within these cloistered communities involve the inexplicable defiance of gravity itself. Nuns reportedly floating above the ground, sometimes in states of ecstasy, sometimes in apparent distress, leaving witnesses utterly bewildered. These were not mere leaps or elevated stances. They were sustained, impossible ascents, documented by multiple eyewitnesses, including skeptical clergy and lay visitors who had no vested interest in fabricating such tales. The sheer impossibility of such occurrences, coupled with their documented recurrence across various convents, demands attention even if no explanation has ever truly surfaced. One of the most widely documented cases, though often debated, is that of Sister Agatha of the Dominican convent of St. Agnes in Bavaria, recorded in the mid-13th century. According to the convent's detailed records and the sworn testimony of several other nuns and the prioress, Sister Agatha, during intense periods of prayer or during the communal celebration of Mass, would sometimes rise slowly into the air. Witnesses described her rising several feet, sometimes even to the height of the rafters in the chapel, her body seemingly suspended without any visible support. The accounts emphasize the utter silence of these ascensions. No sounds of struggle, no sudden movements, merely a serene, upward drift. Prioress Eleanor, a woman known for her practicality and skepticism, initially tried to find a rational explanation, suspecting a trick of light or some form of hidden support. However, she herself witnessed Sister Agatha levitating on multiple occasions, once describing how the nun's veil gently brushed against the ancient ceiling timbers, leaving behind dust that later fell to the floor, confirming her elevated position. The duration of these levitations varied from a few minutes to half an hour, after which Sister Agatha would gently descend, appearing disoriented or even unconscious with no memory of the event. Attempts to physically hold her down during these episodes reportedly proved futile, as her body became impossibly light and resistant to gravity's pull. The phenomenon baffled local clergy who visited to investigate, and despite careful scrutiny, no ropes, wires, or hidden mechanisms were ever discovered. The records simply state the fact of her repeated ascensions, leaving the how completely unaddressed. Another compelling instance comes from the Cistercian nunnery of Holy Cross in Yorkshire, England, around 1380. Here, the phenomenon was reported as occurring to not one, but two nuns simultaneously, Sister Margaret and Sister Bridget. These occurrences were more sporadic, but perhaps even more perplexing. They were said to happen during periods of shared devotional fervor. During one particularly vivid account, documented by the visiting bishop's clerk, Father Thomas, both nuns, while kneeling in intense prayer in the chapter house, began to rise from the floor. Father Thomas described their bodies as swaying slightly, as if buoyed by an invisible current. He noted the astonished gasps of the other sisters, some of whom quickly prostrated themselves, while others watched in frightened fascination. Two nuns ascended to a height of perhaps 4 or 5 feet, remaining suspended for a duration that Father Thomas estimated to be the length of a short psalm. Unlike Sister Agatha, Sister Margaret, and Sister Bridget appeared to be in a state of deep meditation, their eyes closed, their faces serene. When they finally descended, they did so with a slow, feather-light motion, landing gently on their knees, as if they had merely been released from an invisible suspension. They, too, had no recollection of their airborne experience. The reports from Holy Cross emphasize the communal witnessing of these events, reinforcing their tangible nature and the profound effect they had on the convent community, fostering both reverence and profound unease at the sheer unnaturalness of what was transpiring before their very eyes. Particularly dramatic, though less serene, account of levitation comes from the convent of St. Clara in Thuringia in the late 12th century. Here, the phenomenon was not associated with ecstatic prayer, but rather with periods of intense distress or illness experienced by Sister Hildegard, chronicled by the prioress herself, Sister Agnes. These incidents occurred primarily in Sister Hildegard's cell. Sister Agnes recorded how, during certain fevers or periods of great inner turmoil, Sister Hildegard's body would sometimes lift from her pallet, hovering a few inches above the straw, her limbs stiff and her eyes wide open but unfocused. On one occasion, during a particularly violent tremor, Sister Hildegard reportedly rose to nearly a foot off her bed, remaining suspended for a brief, terrifying moment before dropping back down with a sudden thud. Prioress, along with 2 other nuns who were attending to Sister Hildegard, witnessed this unsettling event. They tried to press her down, but described her body as feeling unnatural, as if it had no weight. This instance stands out because it lacks the spiritual, blissful context often associated with levitation, presenting it instead as a disturbing, almost violent physical anomaly tied to the nun's distressed state. The inexplicable nature of her body's sudden weightlessness, combined with the lack of any discernible cause, made these occurrences particularly unsettling for the community, leaving them with an unsettling sense of an unknown force at work within their very walls. The reports of levitation from medieval convents while often dismissed today as mere legend or hallucination, were, at the time, recorded with earnest seriousness by those who claimed to witness them. They presented a profound challenge to the understanding of the natural world and the boundaries of human experience. These accounts consistently describe sustained floating witnessed by multiple individuals and occurring in various contexts, from serene prayer to physical distress. No conventional explanation, whether scientific or theological, was ever successfully offered to account for the systematic defiance of gravity in these documented instances. The absence of strings-hidden platforms or any discernible mechanism left medieval observers, and continues to leave modern interpreters, with an abiding sense of mystery surrounding these astonishing and physically impossible occurrences within the otherwise grounded reality of convent life. 5. Strange lights. The medieval convent was a place of shadows and candlelight, where the natural world held sway over illumination. Yet, within these seemingly dim and predictable environments, numerous accounts emerged of lights appearing where no light should be, glowing with an intensity or movement that defied the known properties of fire or sun. These were not the gentle glows of pious visions, but tangible, perplexing illuminations, sometimes stationary, sometimes moving, sometimes flickering with an unnatural energy that left witnesses, from humble nuns to learned bishops, utterly bewildered. They were beacons of pure mystery, appearing from nowhere and vanishing without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling memory of an unexplained glow. One of the earliest detailed reports comes from the Benedictine Abbey of St. Mary in Lorraine, France, in the late 11th century. Chronicles of the abbey, meticulously kept by successive generations of scribes, describe a recurring phenomenon in the scriptorium. On numerous occasions, particularly during the deep hours of the night, when the scriptorium would be utterly dark save for the moon through the high windows, a soft pulsating light would appear. Sister Genevieve, known for her devotion and clear eyesight, was one of the first to document it. She described a spherical glow roughly the size of a man's fist that would drift slowly across the room, hovering a few feet above the floor. It emitted no heat, cast no discernible shadows that matched its shape, and made no sound. The light was described as an ethereal blue-white, unlike any lamp or candle. It would typically appear near the work tables, and then gently float towards the ancient oak shelves where precious manuscripts were stored, sometimes lingering there before silently moving back and forth as if examining the text. Several other nuns, awakened by the soft glow, also witnessed this spectral light. Prioress Mother Agnes organized vigils to observe the phenomenon more closely, but despite their efforts, no source for the light could ever be identified. It appeared to manifest spontaneously, remain for a period, sometimes an hour or more, and then simply dissipate into nothingness. Chronicles note the community's profound bewilderment, describing it as an unearthly radiance that defied all natural and artificial explanations, a persistent enigma within the very heart of their sacred space. In the mid-14th century, at the convent of St. Juliana in Flanders, reports spoke of a different kind of mysterious illumination. This light was not a gentle glow, but a rapid, almost frantic flickering, primarily observed near the convent's ancient well house. Sister Colette, who was responsible for drawing water, reported seeing quick, bright flashes of light as if someone were rapidly opening and closing a powerful lantern, but there was no one else present. The flashes were described as intensely bright, almost blinding for a split second, and then they would vanish, only to reappear moments later in a slightly different location around the well house. These occurrences were not confined to a single witness. Other nuns and even some lay workers who came to assist with the convent's meager farming reported seeing these rapid, unexplained bursts of light, especially during dusk or dawn. The local villagers, upon hearing of the strange lights, began to speculate about hidden sources, but thorough inspections of the well house and its surroundings yielded nothing. No broken lanterns, no reflective surfaces, no natural phenomena that could account for such intense sporadic flashes in a contained area. The flashes were purely visual, unaccompanied by sound or heat, and their unpredictable nature only deepened the mystery. The reports from St. Juliana are compelling precisely because they describe a dynamic, almost intelligent manifestation of light, one that seemed to interact with its environment in a way that simply could not be explained by any known medieval technology or natural occurrence. Further south, in the harsh mountains of Castile, Spain, the convent of Santa Teresa de Avila, around 1250, experienced a phenomenon of moving lights that defied any logical explanation. The sisters reported seeing small, luminous orbs, described as being the size of a child's hand, that would drift through the long, dim corridors of the convent at night. These orbs were not attached to any person or object, and they moved with a slow, deliberate pace, seemingly unaffected by drafts or obstacles. Sister Isabella, who kept a detailed journal of her spiritual experiences, described one evening encountering such an orb in the main cloister. She noted that it emitted a soft golden light, gentle yet distinct enough to illuminate small sections of the ancient stone walls as it passed. She observed it for several minutes as it meandered silently, eventually passing through a closed wooden door and disappearing from sight. Attempts to follow these lights, or to identify their point of origin or disappearance, proved fruitless. They seemed to appear and disappear at will, leaving no trace. The orbs were always described as independent entities, moving with an eerie autonomy, and never interacting physically with the nuns or their surroundings beyond their silent passage and soft illumination. Chroniclers of Santa Teresa de Avila made it clear that these were not imagined visions, but physically observable phenomena witnessed by many, yet remaining utterly unexplainable within the framework of their world. Consistent theme across these centuries and convents is the appearance of light without a source, light that behaved in ways contrary to all understanding. Whether it was the silent floating globe in a scriptorium, the frantic flashes around a well, or the wandering orbs in corridors, these phenomena remained stubbornly resistant to any form of rational explanation. They were not divine interventions in the conventional sense, nor were they natural occurrences. They were simply there, a perplexing, silent display of illumination that emerged from and vanished into the unknown, leaving the medieval observers with an unsettling sense of witnessing something truly beyond their comprehension, forever unadulterated mystery. 4. Phantom sounds. Quiet halls of medieval convents were meant to be sanctuaries of silence, punctuated only by prayer bells and the gentle rhythms of daily life. Yet, numerous reports spanning centuries and regions describe disturbing phenomena where this sacred quiet was shattered by sounds that had no discernible source, voices speaking from empty air, unearthly music, or disembodied noises that defied all logic. These were not echoes nor the natural creaks of ancient buildings. They were distinct, audible occurrences, often heard by multiple individuals simultaneously, that filled the cloister with an unsettling sense of the uncanny. The absence of any visible origin for these auditory experiences made them particularly terrifying and profoundly inexplicable. One of the most frequently cited accounts comes from the convent of St. Scholastica in Bavaria, in the early 12th century. The monastic records recount a series of nights where the nuns were plagued by a disembodied voice speaking from the empty chapter house. Sister Elizabeth, who was on vigil duty, was the first to report it. She described hearing a low, resonant murmur, as if several people were speaking simultaneously, though no one was there. When she cautiously entered the chapter house, the voices seemed to recede, only to resume once she had left. On other nights, the voice would reportedly become clearer, uttering words in what was identified as an ancient, unfamiliar dialect of Latin, far older and more complex than the ecclesiastical Latin the nuns used daily. The words themselves were fragmented and nonsensical, not forming coherent sentences, but the tone varied, sometimes mournful, sometimes urgent, sometimes a chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from the very stone walls. Prioress Gertrude organized several communal prayers to quell the disturbance, but the voices persisted for weeks, always seeming to come from the unoccupied space, shifting in intensity and location within the room. No amount of searching revealed a hidden speaker. No draft carried distant sounds, and no one from outside the convent was ever found to be responsible. Chroniclers documented the event with profound bewilderment, stating simply that voices from nowhere filled the holy space. A chilling testimony to an auditory phenomenon without a source. In the mid-13th century, the convent of St. Anne in the Black Forest region of Germany was reportedly afflicted by an even more unnerving form of phantom sound, the sound of phantom footsteps. The reports, corroborated by numerous sisters and even a visiting bishop, spoke of the distinct sound of heavy measured footsteps traversing the upper corridors of the dormitory at night when all the nuns were asleep in their cells below. The footsteps were described as deliberate and unhurried, often passing directly over the cells of sleeping nuns. What made these sounds particularly unsettling was their distinct weight, sounding like a fully armored man or a very large animal. Yet no such creature or person was ever found within the locked convent walls. The footsteps would pause outside certain cells, sometimes for several minutes, before continuing their eerie patrol. Sister Ursula, a particularly brave nun, once dared to light her lamp and peer out, but saw nothing but the empty, moonlit corridor, even as the heavy tread seemed to pass directly before her open door. The sounds were so consistent and widespread that they became a source of significant fear and unease for the community. Despite extensive searches by the local authorities who were called in to investigate potential intruders, no physical evidence of a person or animal was ever discovered. The heavy, resonant steps continued intermittently for months, a chilling auditory presence without any discernible physical form, leaving the nuns and their external investigators completely baffled by the source of such tangible yet invisible sonic intrusions. A truly baffling case of phantom music comes from the convent of Our Lady of the Mount in Sicily, around 1400. Here, the nuns reported hearing celestial music emanating from within the chapel, particularly during the late evening hours. However, this was not the familiar sound of their own choir or instruments. Witnesses described ethereal melodies, sometimes accompanied by unidentifiable instruments, sometimes by a chorus of unearthly voices singing in perfect harmony, a sound unlike any earthly music. Sister Cecilia, a gifted musician herself, described the music as both beautiful and deeply unsettling, as it seemed to flow from the very air surrounding them but having no point of origin. She tried to discern the instruments but found them unidentifiable, beyond the scope of any known musical tradition. The melodies themselves were described as complex and intricate, far beyond the capabilities of any single human composer. Sometimes the music would be soft and distant, like a whisper, while other times it would fill the chapel with a vibrant, resonant sound. Prioress Mother Isabella invited local musicians to listen, but even they were unable to identify the source or style of the unearthly compositions. The music would often begin and end abruptly, leaving the listeners with a profound sense of awe and a lingering question: who or what was playing this impossible music in their sacred space, and from where did such intricate and perfect sounds emanate? The records of Our Lady of the Mount acknowledge the reality of the phenomenon, describing it as music without a musician, a mystery that resonated deeply within the very stone walls of their chapel. These accounts of phantom sounds, disembodied voices, heavy footsteps, and unearthly music all point to a common thread: audible phenomena with no physical source. They challenged the very senses of the medieval observers, forcing them to confront the possibility of unseen presences or inexplicable disturbances. The fact that these sounds were often heard by multiple independent witnesses, and that no rational explanation, whether human or natural, could be found, leaves these reports as enduring mysteries. They are not merely stories of imagination, but records of sensory experiences that defied the known limits of the medieval world, leaving behind a profound sonic riddle within the quietude of the convent. 3. Mysterious markings. Among the most perplexing and often disturbing phenomena reported within medieval convents were the sudden appearance of mysterious markings on the bodies of nuns, often in the form of wounds or symbols that had no discernible cause. These were not the result of accidents, self-inflicted injuries, or known diseases. Instead, they manifested spontaneously, appearing on the skin with chilling precision, sometimes bleeding, sometimes fading, leaving both the afflicted nuns and their bewildered observers grappling with visible evidence of an invisible, inexplicable force at work. These markings defied medical understanding of the era and challenged the very limits of what was believed possible within the human body. Perhaps the most famous and widely documented form of mysterious marking was the phenomenon known as stigmata. While often interpreted as a divine sign, the physical manifestation itself, the sudden appearance of wounds mirroring those of Christ's crucifixion, often without any known cause, remains deeply enigmatic. One compelling example is that of Sister Catherine of the Franciscan convent of St. Augustine in Siena, Italy, in the late 14th century. While not fully a nun, but a tertiary living, a monastic life, her case was extensively documented. Sister Catherine reported experiencing intense pain in her hands, feet, and side, mirroring the traditional wounds of Christ. Witnesses, including her confessor and several other nuns, described how, following periods of profound spiritual contemplation, red marks or even actual wounds would spontaneously appear on her skin in these precise locations. The wounds would sometimes bleed, and at other times simply appear as inflamed marks. They would periodically fade and reappear always in the exact same spots, sometimes causing Sister Catherine immense physical suffering. Doctors of the era, summoned to examine her, found no external cause for the injuries, no evidence of self-infliction, and no known medical condition that could explain such distinct, localized and recurring wounds. Her hands and feet showed no signs of puncture from nails, yet the marks appeared as if nails had indeed pierced them. Her side, too, showed a distinct red mark, often described as a spear wound. The mystery deepened as other nuns attending to her confirmed the spontaneous nature of these markings, appearing without warning or physical contact. These occurrences defied all contemporary medical knowledge, leaving the observers with a visible bleeding enigma on the skin of a devout woman. Another unsettling account comes from the Benedictine convent of St. Helena in Flanders, around 1290. Here, the mysterious markings manifested not as stigmata, but as strange geometric symbols that would appear and disappear on the skin of Sister Eleanor. According to the convent's records, Sister Eleanor, a young and otherwise healthy nun, began to periodically discover intricate patterns of lines, circles, and unknown symbols etched onto her arms, legs, and torso. These marks were not lesions or scars, but appeared as if drawn with a fine, dark pigment, sometimes red, sometimes black, and they would fade entirely within hours, only to reappear days or weeks later in new configurations. The nuns who bathed or attended to Sister Eleanor witnessed these markings firsthand. They could not be washed off, nor did they show any signs of having been drawn by a human hand, as their precision and sudden appearance were far beyond any ordinary means. On one occasion, Sister Eleanor reported feeling a sudden burning sensation on her forearm, and when she looked, a complex interlocking pattern resembling no known alphabet or symbol was rapidly forming on her skin. It remained for most of the day before slowly fading away, leaving no trace. Prioress Mother Johanna consulted with scholars and calligraphers from the nearby university, showing them sketches of the reported symbols, but none could identify their origin or meaning. The marks seemed to manifest spontaneously, their designs intricate and precise, hinting at an unknown intelligence or process, yet leaving no physical evidence of their creation. The The phenomenon was a source of great puzzlement, challenging the community's understanding of the body and its inexplicable vulnerabilities. A different form of mysterious marking, specifically unexplained bleeding, was reported at the Convent of the Holy Spirit in Burgundy, France, in the late 12th century. Sister Marie, a cloistered nun, was often found to have inexplicable trickles of blood appearing on her skin, particularly around her neck and wrists, without any visible wound or source. The blood was real, staining her wimple or habit, but despite thorough examination by her fellow sisters and the convent's infirmarian, no cuts, punctures, or abrasions could be found. It was as if the blood was simply seeping through her pores. Sometimes, Sister Marie would report a sudden warmth or pressure before the blood appeared, but she felt no pain or injury. The bleeding would be sporadic, lasting for a few minutes or an hour, and then it would cease, leaving no mark. The infirmarian, a wise and experienced nun, recorded that the blood was always fresh, vibrant red, and would clot naturally, but its origin remained stubbornly elusive. This was not the result of a hidden wound or a chronic condition, but a direct, inexplicable manifestation of blood on the surface of intact skin. The mystery deepened, because the bleeding often occurred when Sister Marie was alone in her cell, with no possibility of external injury. The reports from the Holy Spirit convey a deep sense of perplexity at a phenomenon that defied the very biological understanding of the human body, where vital fluids appeared on the skin without any breach or injury, leaving behind only the startling evidence of their inexplicable presence. These documented instances of mysterious markings, whether stigmata, enigmatic symbols, or unexplained bleeding, consistently present a challenge to conventional understanding. They are not merely internal experiences but visible, tangible alterations to the human body, witnessed by multiple individuals and stubbornly resisting any rational explanation. The precise nature of their appearance, their spontaneous manifestation, and the absence of any discernible cause left medieval observers and continues to leave us with a profound sense of wonder and unsettling questions of what the boundaries of the human body and the forces that might inexplicably interact with it, leaving their indelible messumei imprafti. Within the ancient walls of medieval convents, reports frequently emerged of forces that could not be seen, yet left tangible and often violent effects. Objects moved, furniture was overturned, doors slammed shut or flung open, and nuns themselves sometimes reported being physically assailed by an invisible presence. These were not the results of human pranksters or natural phenomena like drafts, but sudden, inexplicable disturbances that suggested the presence of something unseen yet undeniably powerful. These accounts, often detailed and corroborated by multiple witnesses, describe environments where the very solidity of reality seemed to bend, leaving communities in states of fear, confusion, and profound bewilderment. One of the most widely chronicled instances of unseen forces occurred at the convent of St. Elizabeth in Cologne, Germany, in the early 13th century. The reports describe a period of several weeks during which the convent was plagued by what appeared to be poltergeist-like activity. Prioress Mother Clara, a woman renowned for her calm demeanor and pragmatism, documented numerous incidents in her personal journal. She wrote of doors slamming shut with violent force, often in unoccupied corridors, shaking the very foundations of the building. Heavy wooden benches in the refectory were found overturned in the mornings, despite having been securely placed the night before. Candlesticks would inexplicably fall from their sconces, and sacred texts would be found scattered across the chapel floor. On one particularly disturbing night, a large ornate crucifix in the main hall reportedly swung violently from its chain before crashing to the ground. Several nuns, including Mother Clara herself, witnessed these events firsthand. They searched for intruders, checked for structural weaknesses, and consulted local craftsmen, but no rational explanation could be found for the sudden, forceful movements of these objects. The forces appeared to act with deliberate, disruptive intent, causing damage and unsettling the community without ever revealing a visible source. chroniclers noted the complete bewilderment of the community, unable to attribute the destruction to any known agent, leaving the convent plagued by an invisible, destructive presence. Particularly disturbing example of unseen physical torment comes from the convent of Our Lady of the River in Navarre, Spain, in the mid-14th century. Sister Dolores, a young novice, began to experience inexplicable physical assaults. She would suddenly cry out, clutching her arm or leg, claiming to have been struck by an invisible hand. Witnesses described seeing her recoil, sometimes even being thrown from her kneeling position, without anyone or anything visibly touching her. Prioress Mother Juana and other nuns attending to Sister Dolores confirmed that there was no one near her, no object falling, no discernible cause for her sudden reactions and physical distress. On several occasions, red marks, welts, or even small bruises would appear on her skin immediately after these reported invisible blows, providing tangible evidence of an unseen force at work. One particularly harrowing account describes Sister Dolores being violently dragged across her cell floor by an unseen force, her cries for help echoing through the dormitory. 2 other nuns rushed to her aid, but could find no visible cause for her movement, nor could they physically restrain her until the unseen force seemingly released its grip. Community struggled to understand these attacks, trying to find human agents or natural causes, but none could be identified. The incidents left Sister Dolores physically bruised and deeply traumatized, and the convent community in a state of profound fear and helplessness in the face of an assailant that could neither be seen nor stopped. Further reports of objects moving inexplicably come from the convent of St. Ursula in Austria around 1450. Here, the phenomena centered around the convent's kitchen and pantry. Sister Gretchen, the head cook, frequently reported that her carefully organized provisions would be inexplicably moved or scattered. Large sacks of flour would be found overturned, heavy iron pots would be found shifted to different corners of the room, and on one occasion, a large barrel of salted fish was found rolled out of the pantry and into the main corridor. These were not minor displacements. They involved significant force, far beyond what a small animal or even a single person could easily manage. Sister Gretchen, along with other nuns who assisted in the kitchen, often found themselves cleaning up inexplicable messes. They would lock the kitchen at night, only to find fresh disturbances in the morning. On one notable evening during a communal meal, a heavy wooden spoon, hanging on a hook, suddenly launched itself across the refectory, narrowly missing the prioress before clattering against the far wall. This was witnessed by all the nuns present, providing undeniable evidence of an unseen force at work in the heart of their daily lives. Despite all investigations, including securing windows and doors and ensuring no human intruders, the inexplicable movements and disturbances continued, leaving the community with an unsettling feeling of an unseen presence that could manipulate their physical world at will. These persistent and often violent manifestations of unseen forces, slamming doors, overturned furniture, physical assaults and displaced objects, all contributed to an atmosphere of profound disquiet within medieval convents. The absence of any visible or discernible cause for these physical disturbances, coupled with the consistent testimonies of multiple witnesses, leaves these occurrences as enduring mysteries. They suggest the presence of a non-corporeal agency capable of interacting with the physical world, leaving behind only the perplexing evidence of its unexplainable and often destructive power. Leaving observers then and now with far more questions than answers about the nature of these unseen disturbances, one mass afflictions. Perhaps the most widespread and terrifying of all phenomena reported in medieval convents were the sudden, contagious outbreaks of bewildering physical and behavioral symptoms that would sweep through an entire community of nuns. These were not mere shared anxieties or known illnesses. They involved bizarre vocalizations, uncontrollable movements, unexplained physical sensations, and a seeming loss of personal agency, that spread rapidly from one sister to another, defying any rational explanation for their origin or cessation. These mass afflictions left chroniclers and medical practitioners of the age utterly baffled as the symptoms manifested without any known cause, often mimicking possession or madness, yet departing as mysteriously as they arrived. One of the most famous and well-documented cases occurred at the convent of St. Agnes in Loudun, France, in the early 17th century, though similar, less dramatic cases were noted much earlier. The events of Loudun involved nuns exhibiting extreme and disturbing behaviors, including speaking in strange guttural voices, uttering blasphemies, convulsing uncontrollably, and making animalistic sounds. While the historical accounts of Loudun often attribute these events to malevolent forces, the core phenomenon remains the inexplicable rapid spread of these bizarre symptoms through the convent, affecting dozens of nuns simultaneously. Sister Jean, a young nun, was reportedly among the first to exhibit symptoms, initially with minor tremors and then escalating into violent contortions. Soon after, other nuns began to display identical symptoms. They would scream uncontrollably, make strange vocalizations that resembled the barking of dogs or the meowing of cats, and engage in frantic, undirected movements that defied the ordered silence of the convent. Many of the nuns claimed to be tormented by unseen entities, experiencing sensations of being pricked, choked, or struck, even when no one was near them. The local physicians who examined them found no signs of common illness or poisoning. The symptoms were purely behavioral and physical, yet they were undeniably real to the sufferers and terrifying to the observers. The affliction spread like wildfire, converting a quiet community into a scene of utter chaos, all without any discernible medical or environmental cause. The rapidity of the contagion, the uniformity of the bizarre behaviors, and the lack of any physical etiology left contemporary authorities unable to offer any explanation beyond the supernatural, a label that, while providing a framework, did not explain the mechanism of this mass affliction. A less dramatic but equally perplexing instance of mass affliction was reported at the Benedictine convent of St. Elizabeth in Kitzingen, Germany, in the mid-14th century. Here, the phenomenon manifested as a sudden, widespread outbreak of uncontrollable dancing among the nuns. What began with one or two sisters spontaneously dancing in the choir during Mass escalated to dozens of nuns engaging in frenzied, tireless movements, often to the point of exhaustion and collapse. The dancing was not structured or rhythmic in a human sense. It was erratic, involuntary, and seemed to consume the nuns, who appeared to have no control over their limbs. Witnesses described the nuns dancing for hours on end, sometimes for days, without rest, food, or water. Their faces contorted, their bodies moving in strange, jerking motions. Attempts by the prioress and other clergy to physically stop them proved futile. The nuns would simply resume their dance as soon as they were released. The affliction spread by observation. A nun seeing another dance would soon find herself compelled to join. Physicians from the nearest town were summoned, but could find no medical explanation for the physical endurance or the involuntary nature of the movements. There was no fever, no rash, no apparent poisoning. The phenomenon was a pure, inexplicable physical compulsion, consuming the entire community for weeks before. Just as mysteriously as it began, it faded away, leaving the exhausted nuns with no memory of their prolonged involuntary exertions. Chronicles of Kitzingen speak of a dancing madness that defied all known medical understanding, a bizarre behavioral contagion without a source. Consider also the mass vocalizations that afflicted the convent of Saint Mary Magdalene in Picardy, France, in the late 12th century. The reports describe how the nuns one after another began to emit strange high-pitched shrieks and howls during communal prayers or meals. These were not expressions of pain or fear, but seemed to be involuntary sounds, often accompanied by rigid postures or sudden tremors. The vocalizations were described as inhuman, sometimes sounding like wild animals, sometimes like distorted human cries. The phenomenon spread rapidly through the community, affecting nearly every nun within days. What started as sporadic outbursts became a continuous cacophony that permeated the convent. When one nun began to shriek, others nearby would invariably follow, as if compelled by an unseen force. The nuns themselves often appeared distressed by their own sounds, trying to suppress them, but unable to do so. The local bishop, upon visiting the convent, was reportedly horrified by the scene, describing it as a chorus of anguish without explanation. He tried to understand the source of the vocalizations, examining the nuns, their diet, and their environment, but found nothing that could account for the widespread and uncontrollable sounds. No physical illness, no shared trauma, no external factor seemed to be responsible. The affliction persisted for months, transforming the once serene convent into a place of constant, unearthly noise. A testament to an inexplicable collective phenomenon that swept through the community, leaving behind profound questions about the nature of human behavior. These reports of mass afflictions, whether manifesting as bizarre physical contortions, uncontrollable dancing, or inhuman vocalizations, share a striking commonality. Their rapid, inexplicable onset and spread within cloistered communities, often without any eigenapetible external cause or medical explanation. They present a profound mystery of collective human behavior, where individuals seemingly lost control over their own bodies and voices, compelled by an unseen, unknown force. The absence of a conventional understanding for these widespread phenomena left medieval observers with no answers, only the bewildering evidence of entire communities suddenly gripped by inexplicable, contagious behaviors that remain